Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And we are back here with our certified counselor friend, Thomas Bergvik, owner of his own company. He is a licensed professional counselor based out of Connecticut, but he can work with you a lot of different places. So it's bergvikcounselingservices.com, just to spell that. It's Bergvik, counselingservices.com. Exciting to have him here talking about mental health, relationships, all he does. And I know today we have a great topic about forgiving, forgetting. And it makes me think about the Oscars this past weekend. Will Smith, Chris Rock, forgive, slap. I mean, like, hello, the slap heard around the world. Did you think about that?
I wasn't thinking about that one, but that one, it's timely.
We could talk about that. Perfect. Well, let me have you introduce yourself first.
Okay.
Thank you.
As you said, my name is Thomas Bergvik. I'm nationally certified counselor as well as a licensed professional counselor in Connecticut. I work with people dealing with, among other things, anger management, relationship issues, substance abuse issues, anxiety, depression, and sometimes career issues, as well as grieving. And so, grieving covers a whole bunch of areas. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I've dealt with a lot of issues, helping clients to deal with a lot of issues, and this is not bragging. I just have had a lot of clients really thank me for the time I spent with them, and that's what so whatever I do to help.
Good, it's exciting. Well, I know we're talking about forgiving. You say forgive but can't forget. How does that work?
No, forgive but don't forget.
But don't forget. Got it. Okay.
And this chapter really, I went over it with a client last night, and it's perfect. I mean, in the sense of it covers a lot of different issues. The issue that you mentioned about Chris Rock and what happened with him, with Chris, I'm sorry, the other, I'm blocking on his name, the other actor. Yeah, I mean, in fact, I'm going to say Chris Rock didn't want to prosecute. I mean, that says something right there.
Yeah.
And so no matter which side of the fence you're on, I mean, that takes a big man to be able to do that. And a lot of people might have acted differently. He was willing to forgive.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me just read something from the workbook I mentioned. This is from Doc Children Howard Martin, the Heart Math Solution. It says, in the long run, it's not a question of whether they deserve to be forgiven. You're not forgiving them for their sake, doing it for yourself. For your own health and well-being, forgiveness is simply the most energy-efficient option. It frees you from the incredibly toxic, debilitating drain of holding a grudge. Don't let these people live rent-free in your head. If they hurt you before, why let them doing it year after year in your mind? It's not worth it, but it takes heart as an H-E-A-R-T, effort to stop it. You can muster that heart's power to forgive them as a way of looking out for yourself. It's one thing you can be totally selfish about. And I think that is so illustrative of what it means to forgive but not forgetting, because you learn from that experience. There are going to be times in your life where you're going to want to just, I mean, I went through that myself when I got scammed. I could have let that just eat at me all day long, but I also had to take responsibility for my part in it, to allow myself to be a victim of that scam. So I've learned how to not be a victim in the future by basically, to count on how I'm feeling about certain situations that may look potentially fraudulent, and ask other people for their input, and not stuck in my own head. Let me just give you some examples so we can then go from there. Jim was in a relationship for 1 year. One day his partner announces she wants to end it. Jim is devastated and starts telling himself how she has taken advantage of him, ruined his life, and made a fool of him. He could not concentrate at work and spend his time repeating his story to whoever would listen. Mary's business partner is another one. Mary's
Okay.
partner leaves the partnership without notice or forwarding address, and Mary was left holding the business and the debts alone. She was bitter and angry. 1 year later, Mary filed bankruptcy due to her crushing debt and inability to let go of the emotional resentment she feels toward her prior partner and what he did to her.
Mm.
Well, let's talk about those two. There's others, but let me talk about those two, because I think how they dealt with their issues was very, very encouraging in the long run.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's get back to it. Okay, because I think in Tom's case, he tended to learn, he needed to learn how he did, what his role in this whole in the marriage. What led up to her, led up to her actually leaving. Where is it?
Take it down.
Okay. Let me talk about these. Talk about some others here. All right, I'm going to back up. I'm going to use Mary because there is a definite one here.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, with Mary, whose business partner left her with staggering debt and obligation, resulting in a forced bankruptcy filing, she developed the following story, which empowered her to reconstruct her life. 5 years ago, I thought I was on top of the world. I had a good business going. I had good money coming in, and the future looked bright. When my partner bailed without telling me, I was temporarily devastated. I became extremely depressed and ashamed because I had to file bankruptcy. Even worse, this happened at the exact age that my mother's business failed. So I convinced myself that this was a weird kismet, that I was creating history or somehow playing out our family fate. After feeling sorry for myself for several months, I finally decided enough, that I wasn't going to let my partner's defection destroy my business career. So to beef up my business skills, I could rely on my own judgment rather than someone else's. I decided to enroll in a business school in which I could take a class that gave me a great concept for a brand new business. This new business concept changed my life. I later learned that many successful people have several bankruptcies in their past. This helped me get past my shame. In a way, my old partner did me a favor by forcing me to take a good look at myself, get more skills, and grow as a person. I now like myself again, and now I'm able to see that what happened to me was a painful, expensive, and traumatic experience, but in the long run, a valuable life lesson. That's called making a positive out of a negative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that I think when you really think about it, we can take, I'll give you another example. And I think this was another example that brought up, and I'm going to remember this one because it's so common. A husband was complaining about, was really upset with his wife, found out she was cheating. And so he gets upset at her. And it's like, you know, and it's like, what does he got to do? And then I think she ended up basically, he left or she left. So the bottom line was that after a while, he had to be honest with himself. And it wasn't just her that was doing the cheating, it was as well.
Wow. So
There's a reason for everything. People tend to do things in reaction to something their partners did. In all these examples, I think you can probably make that assumption. And so taking responsibility for your part in the behavior will sometimes make what can be a negative into a potentially maybe a stronger relationship in the case of a marriage, or at least if you do end up in a new situation, not doing the things that led you to break up in the first place.
Interesting. Wow. So two wrongs don't make a right, kind of is what you're also saying as well, because that's
absolutely. I mean, and most importantly, as I said in here, it's like, you don't need to get an ulcer. You don't need to end up having a heart condition. because of this, because sometimes we let things just eat at us, and it can really ruin your life, not only from an emotional standpoint, but from a medical standpoint. It's not worth it. Nobody's worth it. And I know it's hard to let go of that, but in the long run, we're much better off by taking these bitter lessons that we are confronted with, and how do we turn this around to make it work for us? What is it about that specific situations did we learn from it to make our lives much better in the long run and actually become more fulfilling?
Yeah, you're right. Now, when you work with, and by the way, if you're just tuning in, Thomas Bergvik, you're based out of Connecticut. You work in the tri-state area. Telehealth you do as well?
Yes.
Okay, good for those listening out there.
Yeah.
And just to ask you a quick question about the couples, the relationships. Clearly, you're working in relationships all the time. The truth of the matter is people do forgive, and things can work. Things can get better, right? Some people feel hopeless. If my spouse cheated, my spouse betrayed me. But you're seeing that sometimes it makes relationships stronger. I think we've mentioned that in the past. Is that true?
Yes, and often I've said this before. It's like when you're talking about an affair, it is not the sex that's necessarily the issue. It's the dishonesty in the relationship. It shows that you haven't been communicating about the things that are important to communicate about.
Yeah.
A lot of couples will talk about anything and everything, but they won't talk about sex. Why is that?
I don't know. It's like, yeah.
I mean, you should be, if you're going to be talking about sex, the one person you should be talking to about
your
it.
Partner, not your girlfriends or your
Exactly.
guys. Yeah.
Right. You know, and the other thing I try to remind people of, everybody has fantasies, fantasy lives. So why aren't you talking about that? I mean, it's like you might find that you're going to find your sex life all of a sudden becoming a lot less vanilla,
yeah,
in terms, much more exciting, and let it, you know. And I'm not talking about necessarily having an open relationship, although some people choose to do that for a while. But it can be made more exciting.
Yeah.
And people, for whatever reason, they think if you share your fantasies that they're not good enough. No, that's not the issue. The issue is they're trying to, you know, by sharing it, they want to open things up in terms of the bedroom and make things a little bit more exciting, less predictable.
Yeah.
Because if anybody's been in a long-term relationship, it's like sex after a while becomes predictable. So how do you get out of that rut, quote unquote? Do different things with each other.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in spontaneity, and I know it's a lot easier to do it when you're younger, when you have more energy than as you get older. But spontaneity really helps, because either partner really likes to be surprised. And sometimes it's like, because they don't know where it's going from there. It's the lack of predictability in a romantic relationship that really excites most people.
Yeah.
And so there you go.
Good one. Good one. Spontaneity. Bring it to the table. Talk about it. Be more open. What do you have to lose, right? I mean,
Exactly.
It could potentially help. Yeah, clearly. I mean, you're the expert here. I'm just the host, but I agree with you.
I mean, and that's the other thing I tell my clients all the time. I'm not going to stand here and sit here and say I have all the answers, because I don't. I mean, there's going to be some things you say that you're not going to agree with. Fine, let's talk about it. Because I'm not going to say just because, look, it's my way or the highway. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
A counselor-client relationship is just that. It's a relationship. And you need to feel, as the client, you need to feel that you're able to bring up anything and everything with me, even areas that maybe you feel that I might not agree with. That's fine. That is really totally fine, because then we can learn from that, both of us.
Yeah.
As I tell people all the time, do you think I don't make mistakes from time to time? Absolutely.
Like, ask my wife, she'll tell you.
Oh, exactly. exactly. And I might look at back at a session. It's like, maybe I should have handled the situation this way as opposed to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're our own, we're critical of ourselves in terms of, as we try to be the best we can be, but sometimes we mess up, and so we have to be honest with ourselves. Speaking of which, one or two shows ago we talked about addictions. I found out something about e-cigarettes that I wasn't aware of. It does have nicotine in it.
Okay. See, I've never even smoked. I don't even know, but okay.
Well, that's the problem. I never smoked either.
Uh-huh.
And I did say I don't know much about these cigarettes, but it does have nicotine in it, which doesn't really resolve all it does, it gets you away from the smoke. It doesn't really deal with the addiction itself, which
the same addiction and the same harmful effects of nicotine.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah, my girlfriend's like, well, I just smoke the e-cigarettes. And I'm thinking, but you think that's cool? You think that's okay? You're still harming yourself.
Right.
And she's like, no, it's fine. It's better than smoking. And I'm like, it is. I don't know, but is
The
it less
only thing
nicotine? Is
about-
it less? I don't know.
Yeah, the only thing about that I would say is that with cigarettes, it has more of an effect in your lungs. But the nicotine issue, that's a problem. We're talking about marijuana. Look, one of the things I say to people, it's like, I want to get drugs off the streets. So, and a lot of people don't agree with me on this, but it's like, I look at Portugal, and Portugal basically decriminalized most, if not all, the drugs that are available in Portugal. And the amount of the abuse that's going on right now has been significantly reduced because they made it, as it always has been, a treatment issue, which is where it belongs. I would rather take the drugs off the street, have it under control of agencies that have a much better handle on these drugs, help people be able to, when they're ready, to get off the drugs, but at the same time not have to depend upon pushers, because the only thing we're doing with this war on drugs is basically making the drug lords, the cartels, rich. Mention the amount of criminality that's going on in the streets with the gangs and everything. Much of it is backed up because of drug sales. And oh, by the way, I had an experience where I was within 50 feet of a drug pusher being murdered.
What? Recently, what happened?
When I was working in Hartford.
Oh.
And I walked right by the guys who did it. This happened when I was working in Hartford. I was going to see a client in one of the worst neighborhoods in Hartford. And no sooner I get in her building, and all of a sudden I hear a pop, 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 pop in the next alleyway over. I heard the car speed off. And yeah, I found out later it was a drug pusher because the police told me it was.
Wow.
It's not cool. It's can really affect people in a way they don't want to be affected. So, yeah.
Oh, wow, got me chills. It was on the news this morning in New York. There's some little boy got killed, right? And I was listening to 1010 Wins, and I was in the car taking my son to school, and I was like, they heard the gunshots, just kind of what you said, bam, 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 poo, poo, poo. And I'm like, could you imagine?
Well, it was a boy 12 years old that was killed by one of his classmates.
Is that what it was? I didn't hear the whole story. Oh.
Yeah, well, at least the story that I heard. I don't know if it was in New York, but yeah, it was in a school, and a 12-year-old kid shot another, or I'm guessing it was 12. I don't know, maybe 12.
Okay.
13. It was one of his classmates who shot him. 12 years old. I mean, when I was going to school, I mean, I might have gotten into fights, but I never had to felt like I needed to fear for my life. And it's gotten to that point. Ever since Columbine, the gloves have been taken off, and anything's possible.
The world we live in. But and then we have the war going on. We have Ukraine, we have Russia, we have the pandemic. It just never ends. But like we talked about, it just makes me, I look at the positive, try to look at the positive and realize life is so preciously short. Let's make the best of it and help ourselves, help each other, and live the best life. Love
Yeah,
as much as you
it,
can.
absolutely. And that's why when you really think about what's going on in the world at large, holding grudges seems to be petty in comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think this chapter was really important in doing that. Let's see. Let's see. Here's one. Nancy is a single parent to an adult child living with her in an apartment. Her daughter was careless and left the keys in her own only automobile, which they both shared. It was stolen, leaving both of them without transportation. Nancy can hardly stand to look at her daughter. She becomes extremely angry, even though her daughter has apologized and tried to make up for her error. What wasn't stated in that was that her mother, Nancy, who's the mother, also had a habit of leaving her keys in the car. That's where her daughter learned that habit. And so later on, when she realized that, it was like she needed to take responsibility for her part in that. And she finally did forgive her daughter. And they worked together on trying to make sure that it didn't happen again. Mm-hmm. Getting back to the issue I told you about that guy. Well, Stacy's partner of 12 years does not come home one evening, and she knew he was with a former lover. He begged for another chance with Stacy, but her pride and anger held her back. Stacy said she would feel like a fool if she forgave him, even though she still loved him. Stacy ended the relationship and reminds him daily of what he did to her. Now, in that case, that was the one I told you that sort of intimated that she had to take responsibility for what she did. And she said that she admitted that she was as much of a problem, part of the problem, as he was, because she also had a series of affairs. So as it says here, Stacy's story left out the part that she herself had numerous affairs. Not that two wrongs make a right, but a better story to tell herself might have been something like, there is something fundamentally wrong in our relationship if we both feel the need to be unfaithful. Let's stop blaming each other and instead discover what it is.
That's
Pause, reaction.
mm-hmm.
It's like there's something that made you do something. And I'm dealing with that. I had a client, I had a couple just before I came on the air. And he was not hearing what his wife was saying. There was a situation where there was an affair. And she kept on taking responsibility for it, but that's not what he heard. He heard the reasons why she acted the way she did. Not that she was not going to do that in the future. She looked at explaining why she did the things that she did based on her upbringing, her issues going on, and without realizing at the time when she did it that she didn't know why she was doing it. When she realized why she did it, she learned her lesson, and she's not going to do that again. And that part he could not get past. Mm-hmm. I needed to focus on that with him and say, okay, she is not using that as an excuse. She's using that as her way of being able to say, that may have been why I did it, but I'm not going to do it from here on out. And she confirmed that. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we get on our own way, even when we're trying to work things out. And the forgiveness part sometimes is one of the most difficult parts of this whole thing. My wife and I talked a little bit about this last night going home. And she said, well, my veterans seem to have a hard time with forgiveness. And she said, they don't know how to do that, how to forgive. And part of that is, like I said, it's like, so which takes more energy? Holding a grudge or trying to learn from those experiences and forgiving the person? Not forgetting. I mean, there's a difference between forgiving and not forgetting, because forgetting means that you're basically letting them off the hook in the long term. I mean, if it happens again, you're going to hold them responsible for that.
Yeah.
It's a shot across the bow, so to speak. It's like, okay, you've been put on notice. Don't, hopefully don't do it again if you want to maintain the relationship. So.
Well, thank you. And how did you want to wrap up today's show? We still have 3 minutes left. Thomas, come on.
Okay. Just want to say, I apologize. I want to apologize for my mistake a couple, 1 or 2 shows ago. Example of I'm not perfect, but yeah, I mean, when it comes to what the topic we talked about today, please think about what the long-term harm is if you are holding a grudge against whomever you love. I was hoping that somebody would call in, because I really thought this is something anybody can relate to.
Yeah.
But and that woman that called about grief, that woman, the person that was involved in that accident with her husband, I'm sure she's going through her own hell. You don't walk away from that scar-free. You have scars from that, and she's probably going to be living with that for the rest of her life. And that's the thing that, and it's like, I mean, it's easy for me to say, and I'll tell you the story about my colleague Paul, who lost his life in Hartford, actually. But what his family did in reaction to his death. But the bottom line is that that person's going through hell and through a lot of guilt. And I'm sure that person would go through it if he or she had it all to do over again. They would, obviously do something different to avoid that accident. Just something to think about. All right, so I guess we'll see each other in a couple weeks.
Awesome, sounds good. And give us your number, website, all the above, please.
Yeah, 203-917-7674 is my number. My website is bergvikcounselingservices.com. And my email is tabergvik@gmail.com. And oh, by the way, I talked to my marketing person yesterday, and he's having the podcast on my website.
Good. So we'll see you there. And that's, of course, Bergvik Counseling Services.com.
Yep.
Remembered. All right, great.
All right.
Thank you so much. See you soon. Have a great weekend. Right. And thank you for
enlightening us. Yeah, you too, Jill. And it's been a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you. Same here, sweetheart. Thank you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.